Hello students, welcome to the video about your endocrine system, aka let's get hormonal. So we're definitely going to look at that hormones affects everyone, okay, that we're all born with the same hormones, just the levels of them vary throughout our life. From the moment we become an embryo to the day that we die, hormones are affecting us in great ways that sometimes drives us crazy, but hopefully makes you happy. So, Manee, speaking of things making me happy, manatees, as you know, make me happy. So, mama and baby, you're going to see within this video here after a while, but really made me happy. They're going to travel on their trolley throughout the human body, figuratively, not realistically, but they're going to help you to look at the various hormones that we have, and there are a lot of hormones, okay, so you're probably going to be a bit hormonal by the time this is over with. Now, I will tell you, I'm only going to talk about the hormones within most textbooks, but if you're watching this and not a current student of mine, make sure to understand that there are a lot more hormones than I will be talking about in this video. In the future videos, I will talk about hormones that directly affect certain parts of our body, such as our heart has hormones, your stomach has hormones, okay, your brain has its own hormones, okay, but we're going to talk about the major hormones, okay, we're going to talk about the major hormones. But before we get hormonal, let's talk about what a hormone is, okay? So a hormone is a chemical messenger, okay? It is a very precise job that it does, and it's about regulating all of these cells throughout our body, okay? But even more precisely on a particular organ, okay? Remember, go back to a group of tissue is an organ, then go back, that group of tissue comes from a cell. Okay, so it's going to affect certain spots in certain areas throughout our body. Hormones within this system come from glands. Okay, remember the difference between an exocrine gland and an endocrine gland is an exocrine has a tube, a duct that's attached to a sac that secretes some type of liquid when of course the brain tells it to. But in this case, they directly go into the blood, no duct. Okay, but think about that. Okay, think about how long that the blood system takes to get things through our body. Such as if you have a headache and you take Tylenol, okay, take some type of pain reliever, it's not an instant fix. Okay, it takes a while to go through your blood to get to the problems that are causing you the pain. In this case, it's the same thing. Okay, meaning that when hormones are released in your blood, they stay in your blood, travel around until they get to the organ they need to affect those organs, maybe travel around a few more times, and eventually we will pee them out. Okay, we'll get to that part into future videos. Okay, that part I'm expecting you to know within this chapter. Now, when you're thinking about hormones, know that they target the receptors on the cells. Okay, so kind of back to videos way back, okay, when I talked about cells, and on the cell plasma membrane we have these receptors that these hormones will bind to. Now you'll see within the demo that I'll have here in a minute that some of these hormones can affect the whole body, okay, but a lot of them honestly just affect certain tissues, certain organs within our body. Example was one of them that you'll hear called the thyroid stimulating hormone. It only affects the thyroid. Okay, it only affects the thyroid itself. Now, hormones themselves, as far as regulation, it's that homeostasis, okay, so kind of that feedback loop that we have. Such as an example of I've eaten a hamburger, I've got a lot of glucose in my system, my pancreas then is going to be told by my brain that I need to release insulin to bring the blood glucose levels down that's within my blood. Okay, so that's that homeostasis. Okay, remember that feedback loop that we talked about, I would have talked about within that first video. Now, there are going to be a lot of hormones that we're going to look at. Okay, now I'm not going to get into the differences between them far as classifying them, but there are two classifications of hormones. Either they're proteins or they're steroids. Now, the easy one to kind of, if you want to separate them to help you, steroids are going to be the adrenal cortex. Okay, we're going to look at these names here in a little bit, but all of the three, and there's three main ones, even though there is more than three, but three main hormones that come from on top of our kidneys called your adrenals. Okay, the outside of it's called the cortex, and there's going to be 3 steroids. Now the difference, like why would that be kind of important to think about, is protein, again, most of our hormones work on what they call a lock and key mechanism. Okay, meaning that they come to that, they bind to that receptor as they're going through our blood if they have the right key to go into the lock. Now, once they get there, yes, they'll hang out of the plasma membrane, put their key in the lock and turn it, but they still have to wait for something on the inside to come to the door to officially let them in to get to the nucleus. Okay, and remember, everything has to get to the nucleus if it wants to control the cell and what the cell does or not do. Hormones are chemical messengers, so meaning that they can inhibit, okay, turn off the switch or turn on the switch of stimulating and causing an action to occur. That's how hormones work. Okay, now think of hyper and think of hypo. Now, I'm not going to get into detail within this video. I'll mention a few of the disorders here in a few minutes, but when you think of hyper, think of too much of this hormone. Hypo would be too little. Okay, deficiency. Like think of the different pathologies that would happen at that particular hormone. Okay, so if it was growth hormone, for example, if I got too much growth hormone, hyper, as a kid, it would be huge. Okay, so the book calls it giantism. Okay, so you think about the opposite of that. If I got a hypo of growth hormone, then I want to be tiny. Okay, hopefully not that tiny. That would be kind of Lego weird in some ways. Okay, but definitely be thinking about hyper and hypo when you're learning these hormones themselves. Now, if approaching most of the hormones kind of have to wait, steroid hormones are the opposite, meaning that they can go to any cell, go directly through the plasma membrane, don't have to wait, and they go directly to the nucleus. So they just go in there fast. So think about the last time, example would be you had a cortisone shot, or maybe you had to take steroids to kind of boost and speed up a healing within your body. Maybe now you can kind of understand that. Okay, but there, again, there's going to be just very few that are steroid-based for our hormones within our body. But they target. Okay, so think of like a bow and arrow. If you ever played archery or done archery before, that you know that when you pull that arrow back, that you want it to go directly to hit, hopefully, the bullseye. Okay, not like me and go far into the field and you never find your arrow again. But that's how hormones work. They go through the blood. They're in the blood system, okay? They're flowing around you right now, and they will go to the areas that they can affect, attach at that particular area. Some of them have to wait. Some of them can go directly into the cell and start making a change within your body. Now, I'm just going to kind of mention them now so you can hear them, okay? Definitely I want to go through them here in the demo, and you're going to see mommy and baby going around the body. But we have 2 main areas within our head. I'm going to kind of go from the head and work my way down. In the head of glands. And again, a gland secretes its liquid into the blood to move through the blood supply, the bloodstream, to affect various cells throughout the body. Maybe a lot, maybe just a few. Okay, depending upon what the function is of that hormone, okay, that chemical messenger. So in your head, you have 2. The biggest one is the most secretion. There's 8 different names of hormones you're going to hear. The very first one is from the hypothalamus region. Okay, so remember the hypothalamus, that's going to have 8 different liquids secreted from a gland called the pituitary gland. Okay, so that's the largest for our secretions in our body. A lot of names you definitely need to know. Now, the second one within your head is called the pineal gland. Okay, that's going to be one that secretes one hormone called melatonin. Okay, so if you had problems sleeping, if you're a student, you definitely have problems sleeping. Okay, but with that said, melatonin helps to regulate not only sleep, it helps to regulate all these different cycles within our body. So 2 within your head. Now, as you're moving on down, then you're going to get to your thyroid. Your thyroid has a total of 3 hormones, okay, that you're going to see, T3, T4, and calcitonin. Now, on your thyroid, you have these little tiny places, these little tiny glands on the back of your thyroid called your parathyroid. It's the easy one because it has the hormone of the same name. Okay, so parathyroid hormone comes from parathyroid gland. Again, liquid that's secreted that will affect areas of the body. Now after that, you're going to get to the middle of your body in the mediastinum. Okay, it's called the thymus gland. The thymus gland secretes another hormone similar to its name. Okay, it's going to affect immunity. Then on top of your kidneys, you're going to find your adrenals. They have 2 parts to your adrenals. So your adrenals are going to have a total of 5 listed in your book, even though there are more, but 5 different types of liquid hormones coming from the adrenal glands, either on the outside of the cortex or the medullary region, the middle. And then after that, right below it, behind your stomach, is your pancreas. Your pancreas is going to have 2, insulin and glucagon. That's the only ones that directly affect your blood glucose concentration. Now we'll talk about that here in a second so we can kind of understand that one of what insulin does directly for the body. And then we move on down to the gonads. Okay, and I'll mention it within the demonstration here in a minute, but your gonads are going to be where your sex cells, the sperm and the eggs, are held. So the gonads in a man are your testicles, testes for short, and in a woman it's going to be the ovaries. Okay, so testes produce testosterone, and then the ovaries can produce estrogen and progesterone, okay, itself. So those are the areas kind of working down the body that you're going to see within the video. Now, remember, when you're thinking about disorders, there are a couple big disorders that I want to talk about. Okay, I already mentioned one with growth hormone. Growth hormone is going to directly affect whether you're tall or short, okay, because of hypo. Even during adulthood, if you get too much of it after a puberty level, it could affect like the size of your bones, getting bigger hands or bigger feet, okay, but it also affects directly your metabolism. When you think about insulin, okay, now one thing I want to mention about insulin, I'm not getting into this video by any means of like explaining directly like how all the different insulins, because there's different types of insulin, but I want you to understand one thing about insulin. Insulin directly affects glucose. Now view it this way, if you've ever watched Dora the Explorer, and I'll act like Dora, I'll just stare at you and blink a few times. If you've ever watched the old school, I'm not sure about the new Dora, but the old school Dora, when my kids were little, she would ask you a question, then she'd get her backpack, okay, backpack, okay, and then she would search through the backpack to try to find things, okay. Now, with that said, view Dora the Explorer like insulin. Okay, insulin is going around your body right now, being secreted when your body, your brain says, okay, I've got a lot of glucose within the bloodstream that we need to do stuff with. Now, insulin then puts glucose into its backpack and carries it into the side of the cell. So transporting glucose into most cells from the blood is the job of insulin. It stimulates then the breakdown of glucose within the cell. Okay, it helps control insulin also, the metabolizing within the cell. But it only works if it can bind to the receptor of that particular cell. And if you remember anything when we talked about the cell chapters with those receptors, okay, even works with the nervous system with those receptors, something has to attach the receptor, there has to be receptors, and the receptors have to be willing to receive the information. So conditions such as diabetes mellitus or mellitus, okay, I've kind of heard it both ways, is there's type 1 and type 2. So you probably have heard of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is when we have a hyposecretion of insulin. Usually that's genetics, okay, sometimes called juvenile diabetes, due to the pancreas that secretes the insulin is gone, okay. A lot of times it can come from even autoimmune diseases where the white blood cells that literally attack the pancreas. Now type 2 is unfortunately a U problem, meaning that it's an abnormal of the insulin receptors. Either you've had too much glucose for a long period of time and those receptors are just literally, they are tapping out because they've been overloaded your whole life with way too much insulin coming from the blood and the glucose. You've got way too much glucose, you've been throwing at those receptors your whole life and they're just kind of tapping out. Now remember, glucose cannot enter the cell. Okay, when it gets to the door, it's not going in unless insulin puts it in its backpack and carries it in. But even with that, if there's no receptors that allow, like kind of a gatekeeper to allow insulin in, then it's not getting in, and then the levels then start to build up within your blood. And that's, of course, where you would probably end up with the problem of urine. You have some glucose in it. Okay, definitely not a good thing. Okay, so definitely want you to be thinking about, and I like to mention it because it's very important that students understand what insulin does. Okay, it's the only thing in your body that naturally, or if you have to take supplemental insulin, that will lower how much glucose is in your blood right now. So remember, it's kind of that yin and yang. Okay, so remember, we take in food, the blood glucose goes up. Then there are beta cells within your pancreas that say, hey, I've got to release my liquid, my hormone, which is insulin. That's, of course, going to go then and bring your liver and your skeletal muscles that glucose they need to store and to use. That, of course, has glucose numbers going down within your blood, and then you're back to normal. Now, the opposite of that, what happens if I stop eating? Okay, so your blood glucose level has gone down. Well, there are special cells within your pancreas, if it's working properly, that are going to secrete glucagon. That's going to tell the liver, you know, you've been holding on to some glucose. You need to release it. Okay, that, of course, causes the glucose levels in my blood to go up, and then we're back to that homeostasis again. So that's how kind of the blood glucose level concentration works within your body. Now, one thing that's important when you're learning the glands is definitely making sure that you know the name of the gland and the hormone that the gland is going to release. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's like, why are the manatee in some type of trolley? And what do they have to do with the human body? So, my little friend and baby, mama and baby, are going to travel around in their trolley through the blood system. So you can see the area on the skeleton there that has the red of the blood system. So remember, within our blood vessels, we have more than just the cells that we'll be seeing in a couple videos from now when we talk about the things within our blood. But part of those items within our blood are going to be hormones. So mama and baby in their trolley are going to travel around the body, starting with the head, and are going to travel through the body to get to various areas within our body that are affected by these hormones. So definitely make sure first you know the glands, starting at the head, working your way down, know the hormones that come from those glands, and then lastly, what the function. So mommy and baby are going to assist us in the process of traveling through the blood system to the various glands, and then from those glands, the hormones they secrete, and then once that is secreted, what areas they're going to directly affect. Now, the first area that mommy and baby are going to begin at is going to be the hypothalamus region. Okay. So remember, deep within our diencephalon, we're going to find the hypothalamus. Now, from the hypothalamus, we're going to have one gland that has two parts to it. The anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland. Now, from the anterior pituitary gland, we're going to find 6 different liquids that come from this gland. And from the posterior pituitary gland, we're going to find 2 hormones. So a total of 8 hormones are going to come from this gland that's located and is directly connected to your hypothalamus and your diencephalon region. So mommy and baby are going to bring us around the body to see what the anterior and posterior pituitary gland hormones are going to directly affect. So the first hormone coming from the anterior pituitary gland is the growth hormone. So mommy and baby are going to go through the blood directly to every part of our skeleton. Okay, on their journey, they're going to travel to every cell. So we definitely think of every tissue within our body is what our growth hormone is going to directly affect. So growth hormone is directly going to affect every cell within our body. It promotes growth of all body tissue, especially the bones, the cartilage, and the skeletal muscles. It also transports and synthesizes glucose in times when we're not eating. So mommy and baby with growth hormone have traveled all around the body with growth hormone, and they will affect every cell within our body. Now, the next area that mommy and baby are going to travel when they are released, the anterior pituitary gland, is to a hormone called prolactin. So prolactin, hence the name, is lactation. So mommy and baby are going to travel to the breast region. Okay, they're going to affect the mammary glands. So prolactin is going to promote and stimulate the milk production coming from the mammary glands. So prolactin is going to stimulate the breast to produce its milk. It stimulates the breast to develop. It maintains milk production after the baby's born. It's also called the lactogenic hormone. So if you hear the word lactation, definitely think of prolactin. Now, 4 of the 6 that comes from your anterior pituitary gland are called the flats. So FLAT. Now, I'll talk about these each individually here in a minute. But FLAT are tropin hormones. Now, tropin hormones are the job of stimulating other glands to release their liquids. So, if the FLAT, the flat tropin hormones, do not release at the correct levels, then the glands that secrete those liquids, when we get to those areas, will not secrete the liquids effectively. Follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, adrenochromatotropic, and thyroid stimulating hormone all stimulate various areas that we will now look at. Those are the 4 of the 6 coming from your anterior pituitary gland. All right, so the first 2 of our flat tropin hormones is going to be our follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing. So mama and baby are going to go to 2 particular areas, okay? And I'll zoom in the area. Of course, the gonads are going to be our areas that hold the sex cells. So in a man, it's going to be the testes, and in a woman, it's going to be the ovaries. So follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, better known as FSH or LH, are going to affect the gonads. So in a man, it's the testicles to produce its hormone that we'll look at later. And in a woman, in the ovaries to produce the 2 hormones that we will talk about later. Both of these, remember, come from the anterior pituitary gland. Now, the next of our flat is going to be the A. AC stimulating, okay? It's also called ACTH for short, okay? This is going to affect the adrenal cortex. So mommy and baby are going to go to the area of our kidneys. So our kidneys are going to be located right at the rib region on each side, okay? And they're going to affect a lot of what the kidneys do. So ACTH stimulates growth and hormone of activity of the adrenal cortex. And the last area of our flats, the last of the 6 that the mommy and baby are going to travel to, is the thyroid region, okay? The thyroid stimulating hormone. So, of course, the thyroid would be in the throat region, okay, is where we would be located at. So, thyroid stimulating hormone tells the thyroid to release its hormones. Now, we're going to talk about the posterior pituitary gland. Now, mommy and baby now are going to travel to the kidneys again. Okay, so the kidneys are going to be directly affected by a hormone called antidiuretic, or also known as ADH. Now, ADH promotes water reabsorption. Now, when we talk about reabsorption anywhere in the body, we're talking about the body keeping the water. So, antidiuretic promotes water reabsorption in the kidneys, in the tubes in our kidneys. At high concentration, it also stimulates constriction of our blood vessels. So it's directly going to affect our kidneys. Now, the last part of this coming from the hypothalamus in that mommy and baby are going to travel to is a hormone called oxytocin. So oxytocin, far as this particular textbook talks about it affecting the uterus and also affects the breast. So the 2 regions we would be in the breast region, and then also where the kidneys would be located. See, oxytocin is going to be the hormone that is going to cause uterine contraction. Also causes milk to leave. It's also called the milk letdown hormone because it allows milk to leave the breast. But also another kind of side note with this hormone, oxytocin, is it's a cuddling or bonding hormone. It's released in higher numbers in our body when we are touching someone for at least 10 seconds. Hence why it's a good idea if you're angry with someone to give them a hug for a little bit to help you bond and hopefully get past being angry with that person. I know I use it a lot for my kids. You must hug each other for at least 10 seconds. 20 seconds would be better to help you all to be more bonded and not be enemies but be more friends. The next hormone we're going to talk about that baby or mom are going to travel to is the thyroid region. Now there's going to be 3 hormones that come off the front of our thyroid, and then we're also going to look on the back of your thyroid or little tiny glands called your parathyroid. The thyroid is going to give us 3 hormones that baby and mommy are going to travel to: T3, T4, and calatonin. So T3 and T4 are going to increase our metabolic rate. They influence both physical and mental activities and are required for normal growth. So they help and work alongside our growth hormone. Now calatonin is going to be also secreted by the thyroid gland and regulates calcium and phosphate levels. So if you have decreased levels of calcium and phosphate, calatonin is going to put a ton of calcium back into our blood that is directly coming from our bones. So T3, T4 are metabolic, okay, even helps with the brain development, but calatonin helps when those osteoclasts, they need to work to tear down some of the bone, and by doing that they're releasing calcium into the blood, and the blood then is going to go to the thyroid, and then that's going to help to regulate the calcium levels throughout the body. So calcium levels are regulated by calatonin and from the parathyroid hormone. So I've turned it around so you can see on the parathyroids, or the little green on the back. Okay, so these are located on the back side of the thyroid. So the parathyroid gland is the only one that secretes its name. So the parathyroid secretes the hormone of parathyroid hormone, or better known as PTH. So mommy and baby then are going to travel to the following area. All of the bones, okay? Because the parathyroid is going to affect calcium that is coming from the bones. So the parathyroid affects calcium. It's a regulator. It's also going to affect our kidneys, and it's also going to affect the absorbing of calcium in our intestines. So bones, kidneys, and intestines is what the parathyroid does. So the hormone is called the parathyroid hormone. The next gland we're going to look at is within the cranium. It's sometimes called the third eye. It's the pineal gland. So if you were to look to where mommy and baby would be at and coming from for as glands, it's located behind the eye. It's called the third eye for a reason. It is regulated and controlled by the light that we receive into our cranium. Okay, it also helps to control our circadian rhythms. Now the hormone and where mommy and baby are going to travel to is going to, of course, affect, again, everything. The hormone is called melatonin. So melatonin is going to regulate our mood. It actually helps with it also helps with some sexual development of the gonads, but it is what helps our daily cycles in response to the amount of light in the environment. It participates and sets our biorhythms and participates in the sleep and wake cycle. So it truly is going to control whether we are awake or we're asleep, and it is released in higher numbers as far as a hormone more during the evening darker hours. Now the next gland we're going to look at is the thymus. And the thymus is going to produce the hormone secretes the hormone of thymosin. Also very similar to its name. Now it's going to affect the maturing of T lymphocytes, and it's secreted by this gland, the thymus. So mommy and baby would be located in the mediastinum region. We'll talk about it in more details later, but it's going to be an area where our white blood cells called T lymphocytes are going to mature. So it's almost like a college. Again, going through the bloodstream to affect all these white blood cells called T cells. Now the next area we're going to talk about is on top of our kidneys. So if you were to take the kidneys out of the skeleton man, okay, so again, kind of a location within here, one on each side, on top of our kidneys is an area called the adrenals. Now the adrenals are going to be two parts. The outside of it is called the cortex. The inside is called the adrenal medulla region. So medulla, M for inside. Cortex is on the outside. Again, on the outside of your kidneys that sit on the top. So again, when mommy and baby are traveling, of course I got them sitting out here, they'd be going to this particular region on the outside. Now where do they directly affect? Guess what? Mom and baby are going to go to the kidneys because they directly affect the kidneys. Adrenal cortex gland gives us three hormones: cortisol, aldosterone, and these weak, and I call them the second sex characteristics, okay? So the two A's and a C. So the cortisol, think of glucose, think of sugar, okay? It's going to increase your blood glucose concentration when you have stress, okay? So when you are stressed out, it's the adrenals that sit on top of your kidneys that are going to have that effect all over the body. Now the aldosterone, that's the one that promotes salt retention. So you're going to keep salt in the body. And I'll tell you this, if you keep salt, water follows it, you're going to keep water. And then potassium, getting rid of that potassium, okay, excretion. And then the last one, they're very weak. Again, I call them the second sex because they contribute to some secondary sexual characteristics a little bit more in women. And it's mostly affecting kind of the testosterone levels. One thing I want to point out about these, that they're the only ones in our body as far as hormones that are steroid based. Okay, so think of the three S's associated with steroids: sugar, salt, and sex. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the steroids, again, as I talked about earlier, can directly control the cell fast, can cause a very fast reaction within the body. So the adrenal cortex that mommy and baby are going to travel from, okay, so the top of the kidneys, okay, within this region, the sugar is going to be every cell in our body, because remember, every cell needs glucose. The salt's going to affect directly the kidneys, but it's going to tell the cells to retain more salt, so they're going to retain more water. And then the third one of the second sexual characteristics would affect, of course, we think of growing hair, some muscular, more affecting in women directly than men. Now inside, if we would cut open the adrenals, the medullary region is going to secrete the hormones called catecholamines. Now think of amine because this is the one that's better known as adrenaline. So the hormones coming from the adrenal medullary region are epinephrine and norepinephrine. So epinephrine is known as adrenaline. So when we think about this one, it increases our blood pressure. So increases our heart rate. So it's directly in response to our fight or flight. It's going to activate every cell that's influenced by the sympathetic nervous system, plus even more that are not directly supplied by the sympathetic nervous system. So remember, the autonomic nervous system affected the smooth muscles, cardiac, and your glands. Okay, so they can actually cause other glands to secrete too much. So where is mommy and baby going to go for the medullary region? Pretty much everywhere. So think of an EpiPen. They'll think of allergies, okay? And you would give someone an EpiPen, it's going to affect every cell within the body. But it's going to speed up that heart, so then we would go directly to the heart, far as flowing through the blood to directly affect it. Also, it's going to, of course, affect directly the brain, the autonomic nervous system. So it's another one of those that can affect every cell within the body. Now the next area that we're going to be looking at and where mommy and baby are going to travel is this thing. I laid it outside because it would be behind where the stomach is. It's called the pancreas. Okay, the pancreas. Now the pancreas can also be called the pancreas islets, okay, or islets of Langerhans. Okay, it's a big fancy word referring to the pancreas. And remember, the pancreas, as far as where it lays right behind the stomach and directly attaches to your small intestine that we'll talk about into future videos. So this is a gland that secretes two hormones. Let's look at those hormones. Are insulin and glucagon. Now, insulin is the only hormone that is directly going to affect the lowering of blood glucose concentration. And glucagon is the only one that is going to release glucose from the liver by stimulating it, and that is going to increase the blood glucose levels. So they are a yin and yang for each other. So glucagon comes from the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans, better known as the pancreas. It increases blood glucose levels. And insulin is going to be secreted by the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. It helps to regulate the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and then lowers the blood glucose level. Now, the gonads in our body are going to be the testes and the ovaries. Now, the hormones that the testes secrete are testosterone, and the hormone that the ovaries secrete are estrogens and progesterones. So the gonads. So in the testes case, with testosterone, it's going to help growth and development of the testicles and helps with penis growth. It helps to stimulate the growth and development of our sexual organs. But it does have some secondary effects, such as hair growth, deepening of the voice, and it also is going to help in a man to mature and produce the sperm. Now, on the ovary side, estrogen and progesterone helps with the primary sexual organs. It also helps to develop the breast, stimulates development of the ovary follicles. Where progesterone helps again with the breast, as far as producing the breast tissue, helps to produce and line the uterus, and aids in maintaining the pregnancy that we'll talk about within other videos. So remember, when you're talking about the last of the hormones that I'll be focusing a lot on, as far as where would areas where mama and baby would go, of course, would be within the sexual organs. Okay, for a man it's the testes, and a woman it would be the ovaries, and that is going to help to produce testosterone or estrogen and progesterone, the gonads. Hopefully I've helped you within this video to learn ways to become less hormonal, even though yes, you'll still have hormones, but maybe kind of balancing out to homeostasis of those different hormones. So I'll look forward, me, Manee, mommy, baby, George, and I haven't named the one in the middle. Okay, he's one you actually heat up, so I'll call him Mr. Hot because he helps my neck, and he could also be Mr. Cool when I'm having a hot flash. So I look forward to seeing you all within the next video.